There's been a fire reported in the building. Please proceed to the nearest exit and leave the building.
This is just a drill.
Fighting security. That's 19 security. Floor 2 is clear.
Perimeter of the submarine base. And on that particular shift, long story short, I witnessed the use of exoskeleton suits. That evening, a SEAL team was training, and they were utilizing these suits and doing fantastic leaps over our perimeter fence.
Yes. I was stationed next to a place called Dam Neck, and Dam Neck is where the Navy SEALs and special forces like the Marine Marauders and Marine Recon do their amphibious assault trials, right? Like their practice. And it has a fantastic beach. The reason why I was interested in it has a fantastic beachfront property. I'm a huge beach bum. And so I went there on my days off, and, when I would lounge on a Navy base's beach, it has no civilians, it's basically paradise. And, and totally enjoy that perk. I saw what you said. Men in exoskeleton suits disembarked from a Zodiac black craft and just ran a mile in like 4 seconds. It was incredible. I was like, I stunned. And I wasn't really supposed to be there. And I don't think they gave a shit. But at the same time, just what they can do and what people think, it's not the same. Like you said, seeing Navy SEALs practice. I had a couple of friends who were washouts. They had frogs splashed out of buds. And they had good connections with them, though, still, because the community is very tight. And this one guy kept talking about he saw a bullet that you could fire once into a target, and without aiming it, the bullet would retrace. The other bullets would retrace that path. And to the point that I was having trouble understanding what he was trying to say, and it was very earnest. He wasn't fucking with me. He was very earnest that the man had shot a target, got the gun pointed straight up in the air, shot it, and the bullet hit again. The bullet, it was like a little rocket. He was like, it's like a little guided rocket. And those are real. Those are absolutely real technologies, but that's the kind of stuff that you experience in this SOCOM atmosphere, this spec war type environment that they have access to, but the rest of the world...
It really blow people's minds, the level of advancement of technology that's been withheld from them, even though they invested their tax dollars for the R&D. It's a real sin, to be honest.
I think it's the real weird idea of it is that this is obviously just like they want us to know about the destruction. They want us to know about the violent capabilities of technology. They don't want us to know about the therapeutic or the healing or the restorative properties of technology.
You just read my mind. I was just thinking in my head, we have guys training to have exosuits so they can carry more armament into battle and kill people faster. But we have people in wheelchairs that would benefit from an exoskeleton set of legs.
Exactly. That we have, technology on fighter jets that you wouldn't possibly believe is human in design.
Gotcha, yes.
And yet...
certain interfaces and interactive systems that would blow people's minds.
Yeah, and yet we're driving cars that are ultimately like Model Ts. That are a little bit different than Model Ts, just a little bit more improved. Like, think about the idea of we are given almost nothing and told to make the best of it, and thus, it's unfair and unjust to the Supreme, which is, I feel, the validity and the legitimacy of needing to research the secret space program as an actual sense of reparations, as an actual sense of reclamation of those resources. I believe that because...
reclamation of the resources is very fair.
Yeah.
From a practical standpoint, right? I enjoy traveling. I would like to go visit a beach in Nicaragua. I feel that I've spent enough money in research and development that I should not have to jump on a 737 for X amount of hours to get from here to there.
Or the fact that
I
you said
would like-
737, the last Boeing aircraft had a fatal design flaw, and the fatal design flaw ended up taking down several aircraft and killing hundreds of people. You're telling me that the technology that was used on, you know, the Galaxy or the Hercules can't be repurposed to be used for civilian aircraft flight? I haven't heard of any Galaxies falling out of the sky. I think the Hercules is a pretty safe and reliable vehicle. You couldn't have a B-52 carry people instead of bombs.
How about brand new supersonic planes? How about the FAA removes the restriction of supersonic speeds?
Well,
I mean,
funny you should say
Why
that.
does someone get to tell the rest of us how fast we're allowed to travel over this planet?
Or the fact
Who gives
that
them the authority?
we support and accept Elon Musk and people like him who are trying
He's
to
a joke.
privatize the idea of Cold War era rocketry, when we have space plane capabilities, when we have multi-function, you know...
He's a gatekeeper. He's a
Exactly.
gatekeeper of an idea of the direction that science can go and how fast.
Exactly.
He limits our imaginations by thinking that what he thinks is the extent of what is possible.
That's exactly the whole... What he thinks is the extent is what possible. And I know he's being given
Correct.
orders from above. I know he's being directed from, you know, the string pullers and the secret brotherhoods to kind of slowly
Absolutely,
disclose this SSP technology. But, for example, as he promotes and tries to pursue the idea of, like, the super heavy Falcon, Dragon, Ultra, Mega, Omega rocket, whatever the fucking stupid thing he's trying to build, whatever, this week, he's not building... medical machinery. He's not building MRI machines. He's not building, he's not inventing cures. He's not inventing, the better hospital bed. He's not inventing like a hygienic.
Not making exosuits for handicapped people.
Exactly, and we don't even think like as a society, we're so programmed just to accept this bullshit that we don't even think this is like an injustice or an unethical thing to do. In all fairness, if you looked at it as a level of justice and ethics, spending billions of dollars to accomplish something that is not relevant to the majority of people's lives is, basically sacrificing them. It's basically saying that your problems and what will ultimately be fatal to you is none of my concern. I have my pet projects, which are, completely erroneous to pursue. For example, how much lives would be solved with the genetic engineering that they use? Like, how many problems in life would be solved with the genetic engineering they use to create super soldiers, or to create this specific class of hybridized people that can pilot vehicles in the SSP, specifically Dark Fleet, or Solar Warden, or, survive the rigors of radiation and everything. And how many people's lives are ruined because they're failed experiments in that level, like in that kind of research. Like, people are not guinea pigs, but the entire society has been made into a type of guinea pig farm.
Yeah, basically. It's like a mass experiment pool, more or less. There's different, programs hitting different people in a certain way over here. There's people in queue over here at the ready to be screwed with by these people over here. I mean, it's not a very pretty picture at the moment, but I'm just hoping that folks are going to pay more attention to the invisible shackles about them and at some point be concerned for a level of freedom in their life.
Now, speaking about this, I guess it's a good transition point, because I guess we were going to speak for an hour and a half, and so we have about 20 minutes left, and I kind of want your opinion on... I saw some videos of yours speaking about War 3 and MK Naomi. I think it's... Every time someone who knows about MK Naomi, that means you've done your research, and you know that viruses and stuff like that are created by the CIA, by elements of other intelligences and countries. South Africa's Operation Coast, or Project Coast, comes to mind, when they were trying to develop like a specifically ethnically tailored virus in South Africa, in apartheid Africa. Now, what are your thoughts on World War III and the kind of environment for the listeners who haven't heard it already? Like, can you kind of go into a little bit of length in that?
Absolutely. I think it's very easy to support my theory that we are in the throes of World War III, and that the battlefield is the mind. That is by design. There's a gentleman, I posted some links in some of my videos. I've covered his work before. His name is James Giordano, and he has a lot of titles and things that go in the direction of neuroweapons and neurotechnology. And he speaks at one time in particular at West Point to up-and-coming West Point cadets. So this is not a man that's of little value. And he's speaking to the minds that are going to be in the future wars. And he starts describing decades and decades of research that he himself has worked in directly. And he is giving warning to these cadets about what to look for to define as weapons in the future. And I think people really need to hearken what he's getting at. That one of the things that he brought up very specifically is what we're dealing with right now. He discussed years ago, in the future, a weaponized virus that would be potentially presented, with one of the purposes being, everything's multifaceted in these programs, but he was saying that this particular virus would be designed by our enemy to take our entire population and then force them to change the way they create their military, because there's certain parameters that the population has to meet to become part of the state's military. And now we have a virus that we're being told that when the people of our society get this virus, they're now being discounted from active duty service. So we are actively living in an environment where one of our scientists defined a weapon that was being manufactured by our enemies at the time that he was talking. We are now seeing what he defined as that weapon and its characteristics hitting our people.
Have you ever seen the footage of military researchers? I think they were some kind of pharmaceutical contractors that were giving a briefing to the UN about a virus that they could basically infect the world with, and it would target a certain gene that's specific to the belief of God, that's specific to religious belief.
James Giordano covers this as well. Absolutely, that is dead ass accurate.
Yes, it's because it's the idea of retroviruses. Yeah, retroviruses
alter
genes.
The extent of the research that they have done is that they can absolutely pinpoint precise effects to that degree. That if they have an idea or thought that they want you to possess, and by you, they can be very clear, that's all doable. Literally to a sickening degree. And, people will come back with me and say, oh, so you think they can do this? And, oh, you think they can do that? Yeah, I think they can do that, and that, and that, and that. I am not limiting my imagination on the dirty deeds of others. If somebody else wants to be nescient in this capacity, feel free. But I'm not ignorant to what's really going on.
No, I absolutely agree.
There are bad technologies, there are bad people, and when you get them together, that's not good for anybody.
No, I absolutely agree. There's Dr. Strangeloves in this world. Like people, dream about, like the nightmare fuel of mad scientists and things like that. The motivations for their interests, are many, multiples, the legion. But exactly, like ignorance is the killer, really. Know the enemy. You got to know the battlefield, or you have no business in the battlefield. You're already a casualty on it. And like you said, when the day comes that this is used, because it's inevitable that these weapons are used, people are going to be so unaware. The same thing that they were using horses in World War II. They were absolutely obsolete by the shape of these advancements. Like I said, people are not even thinking that the idea of religion or spirituality is a viable target. Like, they don't even think in terms like that. Like, no, you can target someone's faith. And they're like, why? Would you burn their Bibles? That would just make them more extremist. No, you just basically edit their civilization so that, like, say, for example, Islamic extremism is no longer even a concept, like a real concept in people's, like, minds and lives. And they can use that on yours, too, because they say...
Now, even think about that, right? Like, so you even use the term Islamic extremism, right? So think about how fast you could probably convince them that using these technologies, well, we're just going to wipe out Islamic extremism. So that's okay, right? Are you going to get everybody to raise their hands and start saying, well, that's okay. So we'll just use the technology.
The whole they came for them and I was not them, and then they came for me.
Now, who has the technology, right? And who gets to be Solomon in regards to what the good things are that get done with it?
Well, what I'm thinking...
Because that's what I'm getting at contemporarily, is I want folks to understand that these technologies exist, that the people using them are not Solomon-like.
Yeah. I'm thinking it's not even the issue of a judge elected to rule. I think it's the idea that a farmer or a rancher decides to gild, castrate all their herd to manage it. And that's the idea more in my head about the authority, the chain of command, the nature of the authority. It's not that it's an issue of governance. It's an issue of ownership. That
it's just a bigger... It's semantics almost.
Well, the idea of... Yeah, it's semantics. You're right. You're absolutely right. There is an idea of semantics, but it's a very important issue to believe that the idea the farmer may only have the best interest of mind for his livestock, in so much that it keeps them...
I got you. Yes. But it's still only to his benefit.
Exactly. Like where Solomon really was kind of appointed by the people. Like it was kind of, like you said, we might elect a new world leader, an antichrist figure, and he's like, okay, I'm going to take care of the world by giving you guys freedom of mind, and I'm going to take away your belief in God. Like I'm the man of lawlessness, and everyone's going to line up for this mark of the beast thing. No, it's more like it'll be given to your children, whether you like it or not, because your children are not yours. Your you are not yours. You are not your own. You belong to someone, like something very dark that you're not even aware of. And you're like, because exactly the nature of chicken and men is far different to say from men and reptilians. And this is where I kind of am always leaning towards in the SSP, is that there's a lot of extraterrestrial and spiritual, like interdimensional involvement. And it's... Oh yeah,
there's always room for more complexity.
Exactly.
And this is... I've read a lot of stuff on philosophy and things like that. This is actually something that frustrates me, is the idea of Occam's razor.
Yes.
It's actually completely misused.
Yes. It's like Murphy's Law.
People use it backwards constantly.
Yes.
And I don't get that. The idea that people will try to say, well, the idea of Occam's razor is that, things will typically boil down to the simplest thing. That's not true at all. That's nonsense.
Absolutely not true at all.
Just because you want it to be that way. So it's totally screwed up. And reality is actually that things have a tendency to get way more complex at a rate faster than you're comfortable with all the time.
Yes, is that people are actually incapable of understanding the true complexity of it. People want to make it out to be that...
So we reduce it down.
To a binary.
Because it's convenient for us.
Logic gates. I don't know if you know anything about computer engineering. Logic gates is how computers work, like the and, or, but methodology. Like a very simple construction of reality. Exactly. It's and, it's or, it's and, or, it's or, and it can't be either. You know what I'm saying? Like, it can't be both. It has to be either one. And so everything gets defined that way and processed that way. I remember the most infamous use of Occam's razor was in the movie Contact. When Jodie Foster's character had traveled through the interdimensional portal, they had built this device that was given to them by extraterrestrial intelligence, and because there was some kind of snafu with the collected data, then it ultimately was being kept top secret from the legislators, like the people who are the authorities. That guy said, "Is it Occam's razor that you just basically didn't have this experience? This was a hallucination because we have no data for it." And I'm like, that's not Occam's razor at all. That's just discounting a witness. Like, that's discounting a lot of present evidence. Like, this is not how Occam's razor work. You can't just selectively say this didn't happen because it's hard to believe. Like, and that's the idea behind the colloquial wisdom of life and like the colloquial common sense is that it has to be common, and it's not the case with this breakaway civilization. It's actually the opposite. The more like intricate and the more complex and the more fractional, like these are the realms that these people thrive in. It's like when you think about puzzles and riddles and mysteries and things like that, they're not meant to be solvable. They're meant to be extremely difficult. Like, why would anything in life be simplified? Like, that's just not how this universe is built. This is not how...
Exactly.
Like when
all the knowledge that we have currently, right now to this date, I would suggest is just a condensed simplification of all that we've previously looked at. So therefore, it can't really be that accurate, and it's more analogous to having a set of blinders on that prevents us from looking at reality as it actually is.
Yes, I believe that we spoke earlier about the allegory of the cave and the shadows on the wall. So this is why I think it's the whole of human knowledge and the whole of human intellectualism is like the shadow on the wall. It's something that we were able to write down in a 2D representation. And by 2D, I just don't mean like words on a flat page. I mean like the mental flatness of being able to communicate these concepts. Like if I told you water, yes, you can understand your concept. Like water, like I said, Chinese Da, like Da is the ocean, Da is the universe, Da is the world. Like these massive unknowable concepts in very simplified childish terms. You know, yes, like that's entirely human speak. Human speak is like, you know, when babies garble, like when they just try to purr and communicate like some kind of emotion with their voice. Like the height of human, like what they know is, I guess you call it disclosed information, is just that. It's like an infant trying to formalize the universal experience into words. This is why I believe psychic communication is how the SSP really communicates. And it was only possible with the advent of extraterrestrials. I believe that they helped us either at some point in the past or currently, and they have been helping us access our psychic abilities, our ESP, our telekinesis.
I do believe that there's been a contingent in our society through all of the eons that does seem to know that this communication skill is available. And even my own research, digging back into the Stargate program and seeing that they were trying to remotely communicate in different ways, I'm learning that even the people in these programs were showing up and then finding that there was previous research work being done, again, as far back as they can look, on this ability to be able to communicate in a different way. And more specifically, in these programs, they were looking at submariners. They're saying basically as long as the U.S. federal government was dealing with submarines, they were also trying to deal with more off-the-wall ways of trying to communicate information into the head of the submariner.
Oh, yes, because of the inherent difficulties of communication and the severity of the situations they are hopefully going to be in, or not hopefully, but they are designed to be in. The Russian experiment with the killing the rabbits, that is extremely poignant, because this is the lengths that they were going to with these weird, like, you know, definite embraces of, you know, this kind of extrasensory information download. Like, they'd kill a rabbit and hopefully the mother would react miles away instantaneously. They were experimenting with quantum entanglement. They were experimenting with this, like when the CIA really embraced remote viewing, Stargate, and they really went into the idea of like the Montauk Project. Do you have any familiarity with the Montauk Project, or that kind of?
I have familiarity with it. Yes, I do.
Okay, so do you mind just sharing? Because I guess we'll go full 2 hours. Is that okay with you if you want to go full 2 hours?
Yeah, I'm having a great time, Rumor.
Yeah, we only got 30 minutes
fine
left
with
to make
me.
that mark, so this is probably going to be the last thing.
It's all good.
Well, I was going to say that if you wanted to kind of speak about your proximity to Montauk and how that can go unnoticed in like the most urbanized section of America, and it's still like within
That's a
all
big
those.
one for me, yes.
Within all those
one of the
metropolises, this
things that,
island exists, and this island of psychics, you know, and they were bringing children to test them out. Like,
It is unbelievable the amount of stuff that is clear and present under the noses of Long Island residents. And this is very easily provable by going to the CIA website, mining the data yourself, because I can go there all day long and pull up stuff about Long Island and find facilities. And
Plum Island?
Plum Island, oh yeah, that's a great one. That one's great. That's a hardcore facility to date.
Well,
that's one that's on my radar that no one talks about.
There is no coincidence that the movie Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which is a movie about memory erasure and basically voluntary mind control, is set on Montauk Beach, Montauk Point.
Mm-hmm. I've actually avoided watching that movie for a very long time.
Meet me in Montauk. The final scene is them in forever running to embrace each other on Montauk Beach in the winter. And that stuck with me so strongly because I had seen that beach in my dreams. And not only that, my ex-wife apparently would summer in Montauk when she was in high school.
Oh, man.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's what I was saying. So the idea that someone who grew up in the Gulf Coast, literally in boondock nowhere, Texas, in the deep South, had memories, and not only that, but life connections to Montauk.
Here's a fascinating fact for you contemporarily. I just spoke to a friend of mine a few weeks ago, and he's still over on Long Island, and we go back, and he had told me that he had been there recently, and that he knows the standard, the Sage Radar Tower and all the standard structures that people are familiar with, but he also knows to go around and find other places. He said every place that he was finding is currently under construction, having new hardcore hatches installed.
Yep. I think that's because of the attention.
It was previously completely sealed up with concrete, but now they're having more substantial, securable hatches installed. So entry will be now made available to whoever is allowed to have entry, I guess.
Do you think that there is more to this than just Montauk? Do you think that there... Okay.
Oh, yes.
I was going to kind of break this down into two questions. One, that this program has many facilities around the nation or the world, or that the island itself is special. Maybe the island itself has some kind of...
The island itself is special. There's a massive amount of facilities. Montauk is one end. Brookhaven National Labs and the Warden Cliff facility, which was Tesla's, is further east and north from Montauk. But if you look at a map of Long Island, you start drawing lines from things to other things. You can start making a network, so to say, of what this component might do and what this component might do. There's questions about circular and linear accelerators being on the east end of Long Island. There's questions about what those items technically do.
Oh, you mean the CERN? Oh, I call it the CERN because I'm not very technical when it comes to atom smashers. But yes, they're everywhere. Oh my God, they're everywhere. There's one in Texas that no one talks about. It's 70 miles wide. There's a 70-mile long track that does this shit in Texas. No one even fucking talks about it. And it's crazy how common they are.
They talk about things both like, in the military and in the private world, and they say, hey, here's a technology, and this is what it can do, and this is what we're using it for. And that statement will be true.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that there's not something else that it can do that
yes.
they're also doing.
Yes, selective truth, where you're like, I'm not lying. They don't have to lie to you. They don't have to tell you the truth, but they don't have to lie to you. And they can tell you, this is a project for special gifted children. The special gifted children, like the GATE program. We all love special gifted children. Let those little bastards learn, right? Let's give those fellas some education. And everyone agrees to this and signs the paperwork. And then it's...
I have since spoken to my father, at least, in regards to my participation in the Stargate program.
Yep.
And he assures me that this is news to him. that he did not sign anything. He does not know this program that I participated in. He does not disbelieve me. You know, we don't have the greatest relationship in the world as far as families go, but we don't hate each other. I don't disbelieve him. He doesn't disbelieve me. I explained to him what was going on, and he just basically apologized and said that he's sorry. He didn't know that this was occurring. He didn't put me to this, but yet it occurred.
Exactly, and that's, I think, a big issue with like the finders cult and the level of entrenchment that the intelligence agency has with children and with schools and with like that's the kind of rabbit hole into why I don't think this country is a real country. I think it's a farm. I think this is like a ranch, and I think it's
I can follow that logic.
Yeah, well, I mean, like you said, the parents aren't even responsible for their children, much the same way that chickens aren't responsible for what they lay. Like their eggs or their hatchlings, or the cows aren't responsible for their like lineage and offspring. It's not a natural environment, and like you said, people really just do not know, and it's because they're trained not to know, and they're trained not to really suspect.
They're very much in a system. They're very much a cog in a machine.
In the machine, in the baby farm.
They're very much living out a role that was manufactured for them.
And like you said,
I mean, I'm not trying to be disrespectful or rude.
No,
right?
no,
If you were to
and
think
that's
in your head, if you're to
yes.
think in your head of your friends and family, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I said to you, take each of these people. I want you to define 12 different types of roles that exist in the world, and then I wanted you to take each of the people that you know and categorize them into one of these roles. That activity wouldn't really be that hard.
No, it wouldn't.
Even just going by your own definition. If I just
people are mass-produced. People are mass-produced. Yep. It's just a fact. And you can say,
yep.
Oh, that's insane. No, the idea is that you've been given this illusion of personal freedom of will and choice. And really, if you look at sociology from the very beginning, people are, like I said, people are made and controlled with sociology. It's been that way since the 1900s, since the 1800s. Karl Marx spoke about how urbanization was basically creating a new evolution of people who needed cities to survive in, people who needed to be employed in factories and things like that. And that was absolutely the case. It's to create man, you know, it's to serve man. And I think that's very present. You think, oh, in society is to better our lives. No, it's to serve you. It's to serve you a thing, you know, like to give you this life. And like that's what they call military service. You know, it's not like they're giving you anything, you're giving them the service. And it's the idea behind that. Like with the Montauk project, because that's very locally resourced to that area. Like you said, the 10 or 12 people.
It was at the time.
Well, they said the 10 or 12 people. That's only 10 and 12 people that they needed, you know, in that community. You think that the community was made prior to the Montauk project, or the Montauk project was made in the community in mind? And that's where I kind of get that, like you said, it was Wardenclyffe, correct? Like it was Tesla's project, correct?
Those are geographically different locations. They're both on Long Island, but they're substantial.
But they're both on Long Island. Like I was saying, like this whole area was already surveyed and seen. Like, question is, do you think the ground laying for the base that is the Montauk base? Do you think that like that?
Oh, you're gonna love this. You're gonna love this. Montauk, in the late 1700s, was visited by none other than George Washington himself,
See?
who immediately upon arrival commissioned the Montauk Lighthouse to be constructed.
And lighthouses are controlled by the government. Yep. Lighthouses are.
I mean, talk about symbolism.
Yep, and lighthouses are a very okay. The lighthouses are like they control the land, and so they control the land, they control that area, they have the grants, then they have the government commission for that entire deed and stuff. It's very much like lighthouses are very suspicious, and when you see a lighthouse, some weird shit is going on. The whole thing is very symbolic and weird.
The pictures have been since scrubbed off the internet. Feel free to try to find them. Good luck, I hope you do. But way back when, there were pictures of the Montauks in the tips of pyramids coming up out of the water off the tip of Montauk.
I know what you're talking about. Oh my God, Lovecraft wrote about that. Lovecraft wrote about the Cyclopean architecture. Yes.
There that connect all over the place, and this, I think, is why Washington understood it to be very important. When he went out there and met the Montauk Indians, they're a very special group of Indians that the rest of the North American Indians consider from Egypt.
They were white with blue eyes.
They were very different from the average Native American Indian.
No, we can say what they were. They were white with blue eyes. When they settled Jamestown, a Indian who was white with blue eyes who spoke English approached them and spoke in conversely.
The whole east end of Long Island has been very peculiar. You have Camp Upton was the military installation for many years.
Well, have you heard that the Welsh may have discovered that, and it might have even had its roots in, say, the Vikings? But
it's very fun. Yes, I mean, at the very least, the whole Christopher Columbus thing is a ridiculous story.
No, I've seen the monuments. I think it's in Baltimore where they say that the Vikings landed there. Like, there's a whole...
There's Viking monuments, there's Templar monuments,
Yep.
there's all kinds of monuments and markings all over this country
Yep.
prior to 1492.
Exactly. And so I think George Washington was aware of that. Obviously, George Washington was not stupid, and he was the richest man in America. People forget that, too. He was the wealthiest family in America. So he had, I think if money talks, he had access to books. You know what I'm saying? If you really break it down, if you don't want to get a cult with it, which he was a member of occult societies, he always was, that he, there was no coincidence that he was a deist in the Enlightenment, like they called it the Enlightenment for reasons, because they were all Illuminati Bavarians and, German heritage and Habsburg line and, that whole idea of the Catholic Church schism. This is not a history lesson, but this is, he had a pedigree. He was not a guy who had wooden teeth and was really tall, cracking walnuts in his hand to impress people at the bar.
He wasn't an angry guy with a musket.
Exactly. People think that George Washington was a very simple, minded, I can't tell a lie. Like, these men were very sophisticated intellectuals.
Washington had a massive spy ring on Long Island. I assure you, he was adept at disinformation.
Exactly, and the idea that this man knew spycraft, this man knew intelligence, this man knew foreign languages, this man knew international politics, this man knew technologies, this man knew you can say everything. This man knew basically what there was to know, and he had
following that man and the history of our once great nation. Part of what I have suggested is that Nassau County proper used to be referred to as the town of Hempstead. And then from that point, this is back in Washington's time, back in that time, there's a big split on the north and south side of the town of Hempstead, and that's when we got the town of North Hempstead. The town of North Hempstead is a community called Roslyn. And I'm going to suggest that Roslyn and the greater part of the town of North Hempstead was where Washington's crew was. This is where that whole Spy Central started. I'm going to suggest it never left. That is Spy Central for the United States of America Intel.
I absolutely agree.
As always.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree.
And it's been fortified. You have no idea how fortified Long Island is with night missile sites forever. It's a giant fortification.
Well, New York City, I believe, is actually the capital of America. I believe
it's the financial capital of the world.
It's the financial capital of the world, like London City is in London, but I believe that the true seat of American politics is in New York City. Still, I believe that
I would follow that reasoning as well and say that the true hub of the American intel community is in Nassau County.
Yep, I believe
in the town known as Roslyn.
Yep, I believe that New York is very much the center of American military, and there's a reason why the Adirondacks are there, and they're this.
Yes.
New York State's a very mysterious place, and Niagara Falls is directly encountered to the power line. And what you see
going on up in Rome. I mean, there's a lot of interesting inland military.
Well, I remember seeing it. This is not even in a conspiracy journal or anything online. This was on Good Morning America, where they were taking a tour of the abandoned subway system, and they still said it worked. That the lights came on, and that if you just pulled the lever, the trains would move. And you're like, how deep does that city go? How long has that city been here? That
is an amazing direction to go.
Well,
that's some of the stuff that I learned in my career as a plumber in New York. I mean, I did that for quite some time, and that's part of my experience that I'm presenting to people, is that I've also had the benefit of working in some very peculiar buildings in New York that at the time, yes, it was post-submarine service, so I knew there was some capacity of secrecy to certain facilities. But it wasn't until many years later that I had to really redirect my thoughts and reconsider where I had been in these buildings, because it's even shadier than I had considered previously.
Well, there is a tunnel, and I am convinced that this tunnel exists in Hudson River, or Hudson Bay, at the mouth of that river, that submarines can use, and it's a vacuum-sealed tunnel that can transport them underneath the nation, underneath the continent of the United States, into L.A., or to the West Coast, specifically in that L.A. San Diego area. I believe that there's a submarine tunnel. Yeah, they can go for an hour. They don't have to use the Panama Canal. They don't have to circumnavigate the Arctic Ocean. They can go from Hudson Bay straight through a pressurized vacuum-sealed tunnel, faster than the speed of sound, and pop out the West Coast. And not only that, but there's also a lot of access points in the continental United States that submarines use to navigate the aquifers and the underwater, like, lakes and rivers. Like, there's submarines in the Great Lakes. They can, like, the idea of where submarines go and what they really do is a shadow.
The proving grounds that the U.S. Navy has
in Nevada.
For full-size submarines
In Nevada.
The lake in the middle of the country.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, in Nevada. This is where my mind started wandering, because I was like, wait, I always believed that there was basically an ocean underneath Nevada and that Mojave Desert area that connects, like, Lake Mead and the Pyramid Lakes, because it's a massive desert and it's these massive lakes, like these huge reservoirs of water. And I believe it's obviously connected through underground and subterranean waterways. And I believe that submarines have explored this area, and it's all top secret. It's all national security. And I believe that their access to the domes, the deep underground military bases, are actually submarine dry tanks, dry docks.
I would have no leg to stand on to argue against what you're presenting. It all makes sense because we have the technology right now to do all of the things you just said.
No, exactly, and I believe
we have the tunnel boring machines to vitrify the tunnels, vacuum seal them, like you said, if we feel the need to do that. We also have the HARP technology that has the ability to scan for these places naturally, and then we have the submarine technology and the crews that are skillful enough to manipulate coordinate sets.
Yeah, exactly. Like, people don't really realize how agile submarines are. They are extremely agile. They can absolutely navigate the most treacherous of cavern systems safely, like, with absolutely no danger.
If you gave that crew a plotted course, they would ride that line perfectly.
They used to do things like shadow each other, and they used to shadow each other in the Cold War, and they would be literally feet away from each other, completely undetected.
Yes.
And they would do things like bump into each other because they were so good at scurrying around the dark, the quote-unquote deep abyss. And people don't realize that.
The only two people that know what's going on between two submarines that are underwater is the two captains.
Exactly.
Everybody else might have an idea of what's going on, but that's a lesson in compartmentalization as well.
And there's a reason why it's all voluntary. That's a secret space. That's a breakaway civilization in itself. That the submarine community, absolutely. Submarine community is
understood.
Absolutely. A world.
I learned in 1994 when I got to the submarine base that I was now functioning in a world that was different than the people that I grew up with.
Exactly. I was in aviation and the air wing of the U.S. Navy, and when I signed my top secret clearance, everyone was joking and laughing, and I was too. I was just kind of excited to be there. And then afterwards, they just looked at me dead in the eye, and they were like, if this is it, now you're part of the community, and you can be held responsible for your actions. And they just said that. And I realized the enormity of it. I had just stepped into the boots that were left behind by the Cold War, that whole level of, this is a jet, this is top secret shit. If you tell the fucking Chinese this, you'll go to jail for the rest of your life. Like, this is a real, like I said, top secrecy is a real thing. Like, that's an absolute, like, if I told you, I'd have to kill you type thing. Like, that's, like, and it happens just that way. Like, you get initiated into it, and before you know it, you're right there in the middle of it. You can't tell anyone what's going on, and you really can't even tell yourself because you don't know. Like, you're just part of the machine.
Yeah, you get presented like kind of an idea of what the machine's up to and what they intend on the machine doing, but effectively you're treated as a part of the machine, and you only get to know what you need to know about that machine's movement, so to say. So, do you know what's going on? Technically not, but do you have more insight from being a part of that machine?
There's no
Yeah,
ego to it,
absolutely.
too. I think a lot of people have a misconception. There's this huge ego to it. Like, man, I was working Area 51. I was fucking like, you know, I had the pat. You know, I was no. It's you don't have an ego
Oh,
towards
yeah,
it. You're
yeah.
actually kind of
I love that
ashamed
stuff.
about it. You're kind of like,
Yeah, that's part of the system and the program and how they use
That-
it against people like us that do talk. Because like if you start to say something about your time in service, then you know without fail it's like whack-a-mole. You're gonna get a whole bunch of people that pop up and like, well, when I was in the service, I never saw that, this and that. It's like, oh, so just because you were in the service, your experience what covers everyone else's experience?
exactly. Like, when speaking about the Navy, because we both have experience in the Navy, you know how labyrinthian the duties really are, and how complex they can like really be faceted. Like, and people think, well, if you're not like a Navy SEAL or a fighter pilot, you didn't really serve in the military, and you're like, you could have been an operating, operating informations officer, or like, a really adept yeoman, doing paperwork for people. It's as equal of a service, and it's as equal of an understanding of the culture as anyone else. And people are like, what'd you do? You wrote a desk. Like, that's really important. People need that job. Like, you handle people's medical paperwork. Like, these are all windows in this opportunity, but because it's not that ego trip, it's not that kind of like, oh, you caught me in between Afghani tours. Like, you caught me in between, like, my deployments overseas. Like, no, like, a lot of operations are done inside the continental United States. Thus, you don't have that kind of, well, did you get to see the world type? No, I spent my time in California doing breakaway civilization type stuff. That kind of confession.
But then there's also, too, to consider, in the grand scheme of the truth aspect of it, it's, a lot of people, they don't want to give credence to someone unless you say, I was a Navy SEAL.
Exactly. If you said...
But the reality is, there's more support staff that was privy to information that occurred on that mission.
Yes.
Than even the person who theoretically was on that mission.
If you said to someone that, for example, even if you had an enlisted career, like you were a tire, you just made sure that the tires were all right in the hangar, right? Like you did that kind of FRC type work. But you were ultimately involved with a hypersonic experimental aircraft. That's more of a legitimate connection to the secret space program than people are ever willing to give a credence to or legitimization to. You were actually a part of the real operations involved with creating a top secret classified, aircraft. And all you have to show for it is this stupid T-shirt, kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
Like, what do you do? I worked on a fuel farm that had UFOs on it, and you're like, so what did you do? Well, I made sure the fuel was good. That was my job. I fueled up UFOs, and you're like, that doesn't sound good. And you're like, there were UFOs, man. Like, I was there. Like,
yes, that's kind of the direction that I'm coming from with presenting my experience to folks. Is that I absolutely feel that I was kind of showing up into these programs as support staff, and not realizing it until many years later. And that's how compartmentalized these systems and programs can be. Is that lo and behold, you've been working in them your whole life, and then all of a sudden it dawns on you what's really going on.
Like, I always think about
people would say, if people knew about this stuff, if this was going on, people would know and they would tell us. And it's like, listen, I'm figuring out that it is going on, and I'm trying to tell you. I want people to pay attention that it's happening right under their noses, everywhere.
Like, people don't realize this, but a lot of top secret military bases have commercial restaurants, like franchises, on the base. And you're like, yeah, somebody works at Taco Bell in the Pentagon. Like, someone works at, like, the McDonald's on Area 51. And you're like, what? And you're like, yeah, that's the kind of things you have to wrap your mind around. Is that people are involved in these projects at very low levels, but they are still involved. Like, they still do have that involvement.
You become privy to things.
Yes, they become, exactly. You might
career.
find the most accurate information from someone who worked at the McDonald's on Area 51, because people are going to be talking and people just don't, like, that's the thing. Like, he is there. Like, he is a witness to these events.
I'm going to give you some insight to my perspective. I spent a lot of time as a plumbing service mechanic in residences and corporations on the North Shore of Long Island, some of the richest people in the world, okay?
Hmm?
I would be working on their master bathroom toilet, the most glorious of tasks in the mansion, right?
Oh, I get it.
And
I get it.
in the magazine rack next to the toilet, it would never fail. But I would see the Trilateral Commission Quarterly or the Council on Foreign Relations Annual.
The Club of Rome Monthly.
Right. So these are the people that I would work for. Okay?
Oh,
and in these
I get it.
homes, I would be checking out their libraries and conversing with these people. Okay? So I'm going to go so far as to suggest that I was some sort of approved, non-threatening plumber that was at an approved company for people that are very concerned about their safety and financial fortunes. So somehow I would get in these homes and I was allowed to do the work and be in proximity to billionaires that you'll never hear of.
Oh, no. I get it. Yeah, I totally get it.
I would have conversations with these people, and I would get an education as to what's going on in the world. I would be fixing a flapper in a toilet tank, and next thing you know, be discussing a book that the guy had on his counter, and then we get into a conversation, and it turns out, lo and behold, he's some military contract, and he's working on this, and then we have a wonderful conversation, and I get invited into the study to go hang out with all of their friends, and we have a big laugh because the homeowner then goes, out of the mouth of my plumber.
Mm-hmm. No, I absolutely agree that the idea of these blue bloods, these gated communities, I mean, that's where the people who really know live, but the only way to access them, because if you approach them in any other way, their guard goes up, like that training goes up they have as corporate executives, that the only way to do it is as a trusted employee, because then you have that kind of master-servant relationship where the master is always, eager to spill his stress to the servant, type thing. Like the one closest to the Caesar was a slave, was the one like brushing his hair and stuff, and you tell him like the entire like secrets of the empire, and it's yep. Like I met a man while selling moving plans for all my son's moving and storage. I met a man who had installed the elevators in NASA, who had been literally around the world installing elevators in military bases. And, I kind of got a little bit of information from him before he realized and his shields went up and everything. But, he had already kind of spilled the beans that why do we need elevators and all these foreign installations? Because they go deep. Like, he was saying that. He's like, why did they call him? Because he was discreet. And he built the best heavy loading elevators for cargo, for freight. Yeah. And I was watching one of your videos.
Commercial facilities.
Well, I was watching one of your videos, and you talked about
Long Island, where elevator rides were exceptionally long, and I was told we were just going to the basement.
Yes, like that. I watched one of your videos, and you said that there was an elevator that wasn't approved for the cold, the braking system. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, man, they do have elevators in all these installations. And, like, it's like the 13th floor kind of thing. Like, who knows, the buttons are really where they all go. Like, maybe that's the thing. Like, that's the thing where you start breaking apart the mystery, the complexity of the mystery.
There's been whistleblowers in the past that discussed that these stargates and things like that some of the mechanisms that they use for control for the appropriate rate of passing through the membrane or whatever you want to call it was an elevator.
Yep. And that the idea...
that had the right time because the people had to pass through at the appropriate rate or they get screwed up in the process. So, again, I have to trust oftentimes that when I go to work somewhere, I'm where I'm being told.
I think a big telling thing is that once you start reading about the flood Earth or the hollow Earth and that, civilizations underneath the cities, a lot of accounts, dozens and dozens of accounts of being on elevators that take them to the wrong floor, or people coming onto the elevator who didn't look like they're from this world or look like they're from a different society.
I've been in multiple facilities where the elevators. This is actually a very critical security point, and a lot of people don't witness it because you won't be privy to it unless you're sent in that direction. So there's certain buildings that have features where you're told to enter the building and go to a particular elevator. Right? There might be a battery of elevators. let's say there's 3 elevators, and everyone else that works in that building goes and uses the 2 elevators on the right, because that's just what they're trained to do.
Yep.
They don't use the one on the left. But I might get a job ticket that says, go to this building and go to the elevator on the left, hit the button. When you get in, hit this button. And then that door opens up, and you get released onto a floor where there's nothing but another elevator for you to get in.
Yep, it's very much like Get Short or like the Men in Black, where, like you say, what looks like a general facade is just that. It's a facade. It's just the surface. There's so much complexity in these industrialized buildings, and especially these campuses. I don't know if you've ever had the privilege of going to like an industrial campus where basically there is so much more to the building, and they know that. Like, these were specifically built to be massive, like, installations. There was a building in Pensacola.
Many facilities that I've been to are obviously more hardened
Yep.
than they're presented as.
There was a building that we trained in Pensacola called they called it the Big Building, right? It was just the Big Building, but it was this giant, it's like a 3-story, it's not very tall, but it's massive ground space. It used to be I don't even know what it is. Let's just say this: they have full-sized aircraft hanging from the ceiling as displays, and it has hundreds of rooms. It can obviously take a nuke. This thing was designed to be like a massive headquarters at some point, and I would not be surprised if its subterranean levels were actually still in, they were actual bunkers, like they were actual fallout shelter. We have like 10 years worth of food type thing, like what you see on TV when they show you like, this is where the president would have gone if the bombs ever dropped. It has a capacity. I think schools are like that too. Universities look like that to me. There is a big thing when I went to Texas A&M University, right? So I went to a very prestigious and old traditional school, not the new ones, like an old, like the buildings were hundreds of years old type thing. A lot of it is like you don't have access to it. And why don't you have access to things? It's because they say it's safety. Like, these buildings are just, they're too old to actually... No. That's because they don't want people becoming wise to the unhideable symbols and signs of something bigger going on. Either that they were created maybe by a prior civilization, reincorporated, or maybe that they have a dual function, and part of it is my lab, part of it is MK Ultra, part of it's really advanced military. Never trust a school with a ROTC program on it, especially a Corps of Cadet program, because they have direct affiliation and authority given over to higher powers. Definitely that.
That was kind of a funny aspect of a conversation that I had with my father recently, going over the things from my past. And one of the realities that I've had to deal with is that I absolutely, as a child, I've crossed paths with people that have been in Operation Paperclip, that were released from the Nuremberg trials, that were SS officers in concentration camps way back when.
Yep.
This is the truth.
No, I agree. I agree.
I crossed paths with, and in the conversation with my father, as I was, discussing these things, I jokingly said to him, I said, Dad, some people might say that it's probably not a good idea to let your kids hang out with former SS officers. And he just said, yeah, I guess,
that's the cider house rules type world, like where the schoolmaster of a boarding school is actually like an SS officer and things like that. Like, oh, I absolutely agree. That is a bigger part of like mainstream society.
I'm thinking about it. I think my dad said something. He said something to the fact that the guy always seemed like a really nice guy, and I said, I understand that, but.
Oh yeah. A bigger part of it too.
Idea to let kids hang around them.
Well, a big part too is to think about exactly like the histories of people now that given politics. Yes, it's very unlikely now to meet like a German SS officer from Paperclip. It's very likely now to meet someone from the Soviet Union, from the Cold War, who had training in that kind of program. It just evolves, it adapts. Think about all the refugees from Africa and the Middle East that are filtering into Europe and America. Not only are they fertile grounds for collecting recruits, but they also bring their knowledge of their experiences and things like that. I think it's kind of present to really think, you don't know your neighbor. You don't know the severity or the intensity that they have lived and experienced this world, nor do you know their programming and their beliefs. It's just very naive to assume that all Americans are American. It just it's just naive.
I think it's very naive. I think that naivete is increasing. I believe there are people that have a lot of intent that they're applying to increasing that naivete. And I think people like you and I are trying to break that right now. I think as a society, we need to tear down the walls of the digital